Here's the third story of the Mr. Men Little Miss Magic Treasury. Mr. Jelly and the Pirates. Arr! Get ready for a swashbuckling read. Viewers. Mr. Jelly is the most nervous person you will ever meet. The slightest thing will send him into a panic. Even the sound of the winds in the trees will make him bop behind the sofa, quivering and shaking in fear. So as you can imagine, it takes Mr. Jelly a long time to pluck up enough courage to go on holiday. This year, Mr. Jelly went to Seatown. Mr. Jelly longed to join everyone playing in the sea, but he was too frightened. "Why don't you go for a swim?" suggested Mr. Lazy. I'm too scared," admitted Mr. Jelly. "There might be nasty seaweed, or a crab, or a shark." "Well, why don't you go out in my dinghy?" replied Mr. Lazy. I might drift out to sea and never be found again," said Mr. Jelly. "No, you won't," said Mr. Lazy. "Not if I hold on to the rope." Mr. Jelly thought this over and decided to risk it. After a while, Mr. Jelly began to enjoy himself in the dinghy, but when he looked back, he discovered that he was a very long way from the beach. Mr. Lazy had fallen asleep and the rope had slipped from his fingers. "Oh, help! Oh, help! A wave is come to turn over the boat and I'm going to be swallowed by a whale!" shrieked Mr. Jelly, but he was too far away for anyone to hear him. Before long, the land disappeared and large black storm clouds gathered over the horizon. Thunder boomed and lightning crackled. The sea rose up in a great roaring mass that tossed the little dinghy from wave to wave. Mr. Jelly cowered in the bottom of the boat. Oh, help, she shrieked. "I could be struck by lightning and burnt to a crisp and tipped out of the boat and drowned." And then he fainted. When he came to, he discovered that he had been washed up onto a tiny, deserted island. Mr. Jelly stared out at the vast expanse of sea. "Oh, help," he said in a very small voice, and then he fainted again. Mr. Jelly was woken by the sound of digging. He peered through the bushes at the side of the beach, and what he saw filled him with terror. 3 swashbuckling, ruthless-looking pirates were digging up a treasure chest. Mr. Jelly knew that he must not make a sound, but the more he tried not to make a sound, the more he wobbled and trembled in fear, and the more he wobbled and trembled, the more the bushes shook and rustled. So in a very short time, Mr. Jelly was found and set quivering on the sand in front of the pirates. "Well, shiver me timbers, if he ain't just what we need," growled the pirate captain. "A cabin boy." The 3 pirates and their new cabin boy rowed out to their ship, anchored in the bay. Mr. Jelly shook and trembled and quivered in fear. The pirates, who prided themselves on their bravery, chuckled and laughed. They had never met anyone as nervous as Mr. Jelly, and over the following week they came to realize just how nervous Mr. Jelly really was. On the first day, the first mate ordered Mr. Jelly up into the rigging to set the sail. Oh, help, shrieked Mr. Jelly. "It's so high up and I'm going to have to climb, and then I'll be even higher up, and I'll get dizzy, and I'll fall down into the sea, and I'll be eaten by a shark." And then he fainted. Luckily he had only climbed 2 rungs, and the first mate caught him easily. "I'd never thought of that," murmured the first mate to himself. On the second day, the quartermaster ordered Mr. Jelly to sharpen the cutlasses on the grinding stone. Oh, help, shrieked Mr. Jelly. "I'll make the cutlass very sharp, and it will be so sharp that I will cut my finger. And then I'll bleed, and then he fainted. "I'd never thought of that," mumbled the quartermaster to himself. And on the 3rd day, the gunner ordered Mr. Jelly to practice firing the cannon. Oh, help, shrieked Mr. Jelly. "I'll load the cannon and then fire the cannon, and the explosion will be so loud that I'll go deaf. And then I won't be able to hear anything, and then..." and then... Well, you know what happened then. He fainted. Again. "I'd never thought of that," muttered the gunner to himself. And so it continued all week. Mr. Jelly even fainted when the cook ordered him to light the stove in the galley, because he was afraid he would set the ship on fire. And a very strange thing happened during the week. Not only did the pirates discover how nervous Mr. Jelly was, but they also began to find out how nervous they were too. The more Mr. Jelly shrieked and fainted and quivered and quaked at what terrible accidents might happen, the more the pirates found themselves worrying. And by the end of the week, the pirate captain found himself with a crew who were too scared to do anything. Even the ship's carpenter had downed tools because he was afraid he might get a splinter. This is hopeless, roared the captain. How can we call ourselves pirates? That cabin boy has turned you all into scaredy cats. Mr. Jelly must walk the plank. So Mr. Jelly was pushed out onto the plank. Oh, help, oh, help, shrieked Mr. Jelly. Don't make me walk the plank. I'll fall into the sea and I'll have to swim for hours and hours, and then I'll get weaker and weaker and then I'll drown. Oh, that's horrible, said the first mate. Yeah, really nasty, agreed the quartermaster. We can't do that, said the gunner, and the rest of the crew agreed. Right, that's it, cried the captain. I give up. Do what you want. And the crew did. They sailed very cautiously and very slowly to Seatown, where they let Mr. Jelly off. And Mr. Jelly found Mr. Lazy on the beach, fast asleep. Mr. Lazy yawned, stretched, and opened an eye. Hello, he said sleepily. Did you have fun? Sorry I fell asleep, but here you are, safe and sound. Mr. Jelly began to wobble and quiver and shake, but not in fear. Why? Because Mr. Jelly was very, very, very angry. I think we better stop the video before he gets too fucking angry, don't you agree?